Hi, I'm Jamie Hunt. I'm a higher ed CMO, and I have a confession to make. I had absolutely no idea what marketing was, what marketers did. I knew nothing about the profession. I didn't even know it was something that universities did until I started working at the first university I began working for in a public relations role. So I'm excited today to talk a little bit about my path and the path of my guest, Kin Sejpal, as we have both pursued careers in higher education marketing and prepared for our roles as CMO. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, the podcast designed for higher education marketers. I'm your host, Jamie Hunt, and I am so excited to have this opportunity to share insights and inspiration. With Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, I'm designing a different kind of podcasting experience. With each episode, I'll be bringing in a guest for a deep dive into the challenges and joys we all face in higher education marketing. After each episode, you can join the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag HigherEdCMO. I would love to see this become like a book club, but for a podcast. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at JamieHuntIMC. That's JamieHuntIMC for more opportunities to connect. I am so excited to welcome Kin Sejpal with me today. Kin, do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself and where you work and all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Jamie. So I am currently the Associate Vice President of Marketing Strategy and Creative Services at RIT. That's the Rochester Institute of Technology. And potentially by the time this podcast airs, I will be the Vice President of Marketing and Communications at the University of Redlands in Southern California.
That is so exciting. I'm so excited to be one of the first people that knows this top secret piece of information that you wouldn't tell me for days. Tell me more about that role. What are you going to be doing?
Yeah, so the reason I said potentially is because just going through the paperwork, you know how long that takes, but we have already started talking about what I'll be doing and what the role is going to look like and when I'll be starting, etc. It's very exciting. It's a liberal arts college. It's much smaller than where I've been in the past and where I am currently. And it's really trying to elevate the marketing function. They've historically really relied on being a communications shop, and they have a creative arm. But marketing the way we know higher education marketing to be, that is something that is very new to this university. And I'm going to be setting all of that up, both in terms of people, processes, and really just setting up the science, if you will, of marketing with data and analytics, functions, brand management, etc. So right in my wheelhouse, something I'm very excited about because I do lead marketing at RIT as well. So marketing is the vertical I oversee here. And I have a counterpart who oversees communications. And here at Redlands, I am primarily hired, even though I will oversee both marketing and communications, I've primarily been hired to look at and set up the marketing operation.
That is really exciting.
I'm stoked, yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about your higher ed journey?
Sure. Once upon a time, a long time ago. So I was in marketing and theater in India. I was not on stage. I was behind the scenes, and we did productions for the general public, but we also used theater as a way to teach students expression and confidence. So I did work at the intersection of marketing and education, if you will, in India. It wasn't a traditional education, it was more extracurricular, if you will. And that got me very interested and excited working with students because they're just soaking it all up like a sponge, and families were all proud and happy. And that's where I started that. And then when I moved to the US, so I moved from India to Indiana. So just adding an NA at the end, if you will, but a huge change, as you might imagine, where I went to Purdue University. I w- pursued my master's in communication. It was always my goal to get a degree from the US, and it didn't pan out that I could get my bachelor's degree in the US. I did try to make that happen, but it was financially quite a lift for my family, so I ended up coming here for my master's. And while I was doing my master's, I did a lot of projects and internships with my professors and other areas of Purdue University, where I got my hands dirty with doing projects for, say, the School of Veterinary Medicine. My branding professor, was consulting for them to help position them in in the marketplace as a hospital that is not just for Purdue staff, students, and faculty, but really for anybody who had a pet. So projects like that, projects like I even worked with the Student Health Center. They needed somebody to do health promotion and help change behavior in that regard. So whether it was anti-smoking campaigns or sleep or stress, I was I was assigned to do some of that research and campaign planning. So all of this was done while pursuing graduate school, and I was in the Purdue ecosystem for the most part. So as I was going through my degree, I realized that this is really fascinating, and understanding different types of audiences within a higher education institution was something that was very intriguing, and it allowed me to continue to learn. And I thought, I wonder if this could become my career and my career of choice after I graduate. And it did, because when I graduated, um, Purdue had recently reorganized. They were predominantly an external relations shop, and then they had a creative function that did a lot of the brochures and writing and design, etc. But they just hired their first CMO, which at the time was like, what? Our university is going to have a CMO? Why do we need to market ourselves? We are Purdue University, etc. But I could see the vision, having studied that, having been there. So I went to the newly appointed CMO, Terry Thompson. That name might be familiar to a few of you listening, but she was one of the OGs, I think, in my opinion, along with Terry Flannery and a few others who paved the way for higher education marketing. Anyway, I got a chance to meet with her, and I asked her what she was doing in terms of reorganization and what her plans forward were. And I shared with her my experience both in India and at Purdue University. And she said that, there could be a place for somebody with my skill set, because they didn't really have people doing brand management and those types of functions. And I'd already dabbled in that area and learned a lot in that area with my professors at the time. So fast forward a few months later, there was a position that was open. I believe it was created for me. I think my supervisor, Nancy Hannibal, at the time will attest to that, because she said, we got to get you on board. I think you'll provide great value to our organization. So yeah, I was the first marketing consultant hired from the outside to do marketing strategy and brand management. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Purdue is a great place to cut your teeth on higher ed marketing. I mean, they are Fast Magazine's only higher education institution, I think, in terms of brands that matter. AMA Marketing Team of the Year, I think. Just phenomenal place for you to kind of get started in your career. What year was that you were starting out there?
Yeah, so it was before all these lovely accolades, which, timing is everything. But I will say Terry Thompson, too, was quite a pace setter, and she was also awarded the Higher Ed Marketer of the Year at AMA very early in her career in higher education. So this was in 2009 that I started at Purdue, and which is when we started doing brand research and formulating a brand strategy, and I was the project manager for the entire 2-year long initiative.
So when you mentioned that your undergraduate degree is from India. What is your undergraduate major?
Management.
Okay.
So I can expand a little bit on that because you really didn't have many choices in India at the time. When you pursued your bachelor's degrees, there were essentially 3 tracks. You either went into the commerce/management discipline, you went into the arts, or you went into the sciences/engineering. Those were really the only 3 options if you wanted to pursue a bachelor's degree. Then perhaps there were opportunities to specialize, but not many. So it was really by process of elimination and the available options. But my work in India was really more marketing focused. So I don't know that my education and my professional endeavors were very much aligned at the time. Again, I went with what I was provided as options and opportunities. But I'm glad I got that because I think I got a broad perspective of management very early in my education. But then I got real hands-on experience at Ace Productions in India as well.
Hey all, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO. I want to take just a quick moment to thank my friends at Nectar who made this new Enrollify podcast possible. Nectar brings affordable communications infrastructure to college campuses. It's like Slack, but for the higher ed student experience. Nectar integrates seamlessly with all major LMSs, making it easy for instructors and administrators to build emergent learning communities in all of their classes and groups without the extra work. Their focus is on boosting student engagement and reducing instructor stress by building a learning community in every classroom. By leveraging familiar technology like instant messaging channels, Nectar prepares students for the remote yet collaborative work environment of the future. You can learn more about their platform by heading on over to Nectar. That's nectir.io, and be sure to tell the team that Jaime sent you their way. So when you were a little girl, what were you dreaming that you would grow up to be?
Oh gosh. I will tell you, it was not a higher education CMO. I wish we knew what the range of options are and were at the time, because there was, even now I feel like you go to a school or you see a middle school, elementary school, and you have career days and you have the quintessential, whether it's a pilot or a firefighter or a nurse or a doctor, etc. So yeah, I knew that I'll be doing something with people. And that's really as far as I got. And then there was a time where I was really enjoying my extracurricular activities, especially dance and theater. And so I thought maybe that could become my career. And so I pursued that on the side, if you will, for a long time. But it was pretty obvious that's that was not going to take me places, that it was best kept as a hobby. Also, because I don't think I would get paid for my talents. I don't think I was that good.
I was, when I think about when I was a little kid, you bring up like doctors, nurses, that sort of thing. Those are the careers you see on TV. I was a first generation college student, and it was sort of, I didn't know what the options were. I didn't have any exposure to any of that. And I majored in journalism, but my original college major was biology. I wanted to study turtles, and you could get me going on a whole thing about turtles if you had the time to and the inclination. But I sort of fell into marketing, and I think that happens a lot.
It does. I don't know how many people I might have encountered through my career that really did not start out as a marketing major. It's all different tracks, all different pathways. I mean, one of my favorite people, Elizabeth Scarborough Johnson, from Simpson Scarborough, like she was a math major, and I remember her saying that she just fell in love with statistics and started doing research and data, and then founded the company and did primarily brand research, and now how far they've come. But yeah, they come from really any and all backgrounds, which is interesting. But I also feel like there's an educational component here that is missing. That hopefully that we can help others figure out there are options, and figure those out early in the career, as opposed to it's like, oh, 20 years ago, I wish I had done that. I hope that we don't have many people who are in that place of regret. And that really happens through education and exposure. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't regret my early career because I really enjoyed being a journalist. But I do wish that I would have had exposure to marketing a little bit earlier and had a more intentionality for my career. I sort of stumbled into my career. This episode is kind of about that, prepping yourself for the CMO role. And I'm interested in what your path or what you've done to prepare yourself for a CMO role.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned about intentionality, because for a while there, even though that was something I aspired to be, there were a lot of things that got in the way of that pursuit, and I can delve into that a little bit later. But from I think it's really how we manage brands, right? You manage your institution as a brand, you manage higher education as a brand, you manage yourself as a brand. So if that is something that you want to do, you kind of figure out, okay, this is what I aspire to be, and here's all the steps I need to take. Here's all the skills I need to gain. Here are all the experiences I need to have in order to position myself for this ultimate goal. So I really think of it as really your personal brand development, or I guess your professional brand development. And I got more intentional as opportunities allowed me to. So one of the restrictions for me was I came from a different country, and so I really had to work through all the, let's say, legal hurdles to get to where I wanted to be. So oftentimes I didn't even have a choice in what I could and could not pursue because of the restrictions within which I was working. So with that aside, which is a big caveat, I was really getting involved in a lot of associations right from the get-go. I was in the local West Lafayette, Indiana chapter of the American Advertising Federation. AMA did not have a local chapter there, so I could not join anything there. But I joined the AAF as a student member. Then I became a professional member. Then I served on the committee to plan all the events and speakers, etc. So I whatever was possible and available in that small town and what I could do as a volunteer, I feel like I did. Um, I had a brief stint in DC. I was, again, going to a lot of meetups for those. DC's like buzzing with meetups, which is just people with common interests getting together over and networking over drinks or appetizers or what have you. So I went to a lot of marketing and higher education related meetups. So I've always been intentional and active in the field, and it doesn't come very naturally to me. I'm not an extrovert, and just to put myself out there has been difficult, but something I'm more and more comfortable with now.
Do you have
And
any advice for people who are uncomfortable with getting out there?
yeah, that's a great question. Well, now there is the opportunity to do so many things virtually that if you just didn't want to get out and be in a crowd of people, just a one-on-one Zoom coffee, perhaps start there and allow yourself to just learn and absorb what the other person has to say, ask questions. You don't have to be doing all the talking. Sometimes people feel like, you go to these events or you network or whatnot, and you really have to have a lot of content to talk about. But you just have to be curious, I think, and not just curious in a fake kind of way, but really genuinely curious about people's journeys or how they do what they do and things of that sort. And that can be done in a large group setting or one-on-one. So, whatever people's comfort level is, or you can go to a conference, and the conferences of all shapes and sizes. The conference is now both virtually or in person. And, there are small group sessions there, like roundtables, or there are massive keynotes and where you are with 100, 200, 500 other people. So I think the virtual world has allowed us that opportunity to really connect, even if connect in multiple ways and connect at our own comfort level. So I think people can definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think the virtual conferences have been really a boon because you get the opportunity to attend, learn, network without necessarily having to have the travel budget. So in the past couple of years, I've been able to go to a lot more conferences than I have in the past. And I think I was an incredibly shy person. And why would somebody who's shy pursue journalism? But I go into those settings with, I can always ask questions. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to, if I don't have to be prepared to talk about anything in particular as long as I can ask questions. And that's usually what I tell my interns when they're approaching a networking opportunity. Like, don't be nervous. Just ask people. Just be a curious person.
Yeah, people love talking about themselves, and just give them that opportunity, give them that floor, and you have no idea how far that could go in terms of a conversation. And yeah, if you go on a virtual conference, turn your video off if you want. If you feel that it's just a sensory overload for your introvert self, and then come back on later. There's just ways to work around your own personality and comfort level that doesn't have to be all that difficult. But at the same time, I think just continually pushing yourself just a tad, just a baby step further, I think can help in the long run.
I feel like the networking part of preparing yourself to be a CMO is really, really important. Like, it's whether you're doing it on social media or you're doing it on podcasts or you're going to conferences or virtual conferences. I've heard the saying, if you do things right, you don't have to interview for a job. You're just, people think of you. And I think that that's
Mm-hmm.
really, really true. Obviously, public higher ed in particular, they're not just necessarily going to hire somebody off the street without an interview process, but there's something to be said there. You mentioned earlier that you took it upon yourself to approach Terry to talk about marketing at Purdue. And that little spark of something, being that person that will ask that question, I think is so smart. And have you had that happen to you on the other side? Have you had a student or a young marketer approach you for that in that same sort of way?
Yes, absolutely. I have had many, and most often they actually turn out to be international students. I think they kind of feel that kinship with me. I don't know, but I had to mention that word because for a while there I had my own sort of volunteer gig going on called Kinship Career Services for International Students. Because as an international student, I was struggling to get career advice and learn from people who have been in my shoes because some of the hurdles that I had to go through were quite different from people who are perhaps born and raised here or have a different citizenship status, or they just happen to be in STEM fields, which also gives them a little bit of a different pathway and more options and opportunities. So when I found myself going through some of that on my own and figuring it out, if you will, I'm like, I want to do this for other people. So when I launched Kinship, I had quite a few international students reach out to me and ask me for advice, and they may or may not be interested in marketing per se. They just wanted to know, hey, as an international student, and if you wanted to work here, how did you go about it? How did you position yourself, and what did you do differently? Because sometimes they just look at their experience on paper, and all of the experience might be from a different country or may not be in the exact same major because, like I said, in India my options for majors were so limited. So how do you get around some of those hurdles? So yeah, I actually had a student from RIT reach out just this morning asking for some help and guidance. And she is originally from China, and I'll be meeting with her, and hopefully I can help her in a meaningful way.
I love that you're helping the next generation. Like, I think I talked with Jason about this in episode 2 about the idea of prepping the next generation of CMOs or marketers and trying to diversify our profession. Like, I think about my time in the UNC system, and all of the big schools, the marketing offices were headed by men, white men specifically. And the rest of the smaller campuses, it was, women everywhere. But that it was really striking that
Mm-hmm.
that difference. As a woman and as an immigrant and as a woman of color, what challenges do you feel like need to be overcome for women in the same sort of situation?
Yeah, I mean that's really why I do what I do. I think part of it is to really not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And I feel like no industry should be all white and all male, just period. And I saw the same thing you did until again I was graduating and I saw a woman CMO hired at the first one hired at Purdue, and that was very inspiring. But as I started getting into the field more and more, I did not see many people that looked like me, and especially not in leadership positions. And so it was very important. But there, I will say it came with its challenges. I mentioned the immigration issue being one big one that some companies or organizations, I should say, just had policies, plain and simple, that they could not sponsor somebody from the outside, and because that would require incurring extra costs and doing more paperwork. So already those doors were shut. There was nothing that could get me past that. in some organizations. So really trying to not only help people understand that I'm good at what I do, but why I'm better than somebody who is from here and why that investment is worth it. So the whole idea of ROI, like we talk about with educational institutions and whatnot, I had to talk about my own ROI. I had to talk about like, yeah, I know there's some upfront legalities to work through because some were open to it, but they just felt that maybe it was a little bit of a hassle and, would it be worth it, etc. And I had to really help them understand why investing in me as a candidate would be a good idea for them in the long run, and not just investing in me as filling a role, but investing in me and doing all the things that they needed to do. So I'm very fortunate that I had Purdue University believe in me in that regard, because when the time did come for that conversation, so after I graduate, I have a few months where I can work without that sponsorship and work authorization, but then I did have to ask for that, and they made it happen. And that just goes to show that, you really want to align with the organization's values. If the organization is talking about diversity and inclusion and being a global university, etc., how is it doing that really? And this was proof that they were doing that and they could do that. And RIT does that as well, except when I came to RIT, I did not need work authorization because I got my permanent residency by the time. But even so, I'm very particular about the kind of values a university espouses and making sure that align with mine. And that's where I can do my best work.
So when you talked about creating an ROI pitch for yourself, how do you tackle that? Because I think that could apply not just for people looking to have their employer make an investment in, the legalities of hiring, but just generally, how did you approach that conversation with yourself?
Yeah, I think you just have to show proof. I mean, you show proof of all the work you've done, and you tell your compelling story. You have your elevator pitch. I mean, some of the basic mantras of branding really apply here as well. And you help them understand that, hey, here's what I'm bringing to the table that is better, different, and special, that perhaps you might not get with other candidates. In my case, whether it's my global experience, whether it was, after I went and got my MBA as well, so whether it's talking about just the fact that I've always continued to upskill myself. I got 2 master's degrees. I had a bachelor's degree in India. I got a certificate in India. And then I got some market research certificates in US. So I've always continued to pursue education myself as a lifelong learner. So really being very articulate and thoughtful about what you want to put in front of people, the hiring managers that will set you apart. That, right from the get-go, like I already had a couple of publications in journals that I had co-authored with my professor, things of that sort that the industry doesn't really need or look for, but it does set you apart, and it shows that, yeah, you actually have something of value to add to the industry that was compelling enough to be published. So yeah, just seeing what sets you apart and then putting that both on paper and having that in your pitch when you meet with people.
Hey y'all, Zach here from Enrollify. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. Our shows feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Mickey Baines, Jeremy Tiers, Jamie Hunt, Corynn Myers, Jaime Gleason, and many, many more. You can learn more about the Enrollify Podcast Network at podcasts.enrollify.org. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea. Find yours at podcasts.enrollify.org.
That's awesome. I think that's really helpful advice for people early in their careers. Are there still skills that you're working on honing? I know now you've got that CMO title, but are there still skills you're hoping to hone in this next role?
I feel like I'm always honing skills. I think, first of all, the marketing landscape is always changing. So I think just being up to date with the changing face of the intersection of marketing and technology, I think that's something to keep up with no matter where you are in your career. Every day there's a new privacy setting that you have to think about, or this move to Google for, what have you. There's always going to be things that you want to think about and learn. And although I have, I do consider myself to be more of a marketing generalist than a specialist. So I learn enough, I feel like, to ask the right questions and to understand where things are going and what is effective versus what could be just placating or vanity metrics that feel like things are effective. So I feel like I know enough of that and continue to hone those skills to really know the subject that I'm asking about or the topic I'm asking about. But outside of functional skills, I think people skills are always getting finessed, right? And especially as you move up the ladder, it really becomes more and more about people management and leading by influence, and how do you get your peers on board? How do you work with your team so that their morale is high and they feel valued? How do you manage up, whether it's your immediate supervisor, i.e. the president or the board? I think there's just so many components to people skills and leadership. And I know you talk about this topic a lot as well, especially as we lead and create a more and more diverse and inclusive organization. What does that mean? What does that mean for us to be learning? And what does that mean for us to really not just understand it, but embrace it? And what does it mean to not only lead with goals and metrics, but what does it mean to lead with empathy and compassion? And so there's so much work to be done there, and so much that can continually be learned and finessed there. I feel like that's going to be one of the ongoing skill sets. And now, leading in a virtual environment, if you have people that are working remotely, how do you build culture and sustain that culture in a way that people feel a sense of belonging? So that's where my focus is right now, and I feel like it will be for the foreseeable future.
So it sounds like you're going to be building a team in your new role. What are you going to be looking for when you start to post positions and hire into those roles?
Oh gosh, everything. No, I think I recently read or reread Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor, and she talks about having rock stars and superstars. And I think just being cognizant of that, valuing the rock stars who really have that institutional knowledge and really have a subject matter understanding, maybe are not passionate about growth, but are passionate about their particular skill and getting deep into that skill. And then others who are really constantly learning and evolving and wanting to go up the ladder and really grow and help the organization grow. So that's really more from a philosophical approach, but from a functional or technical expertise, I feel like it at this point, it's really going to be driven a lot by the gaps that are currently identified, which are, in the branding area, in the marketing intelligence area, in the content marketing, content strategy area, digital area. I think those are going to be primary areas of focus. Now, whether or not those become actual full-time hires, or there's a combination of rent, buy, or own, where we have some people in-house, but we also outsource some certain functions. And I know you and I were in a recent conversation about that. How do you build a team when things are constantly changing, and how do you continue to upskill your staff, or do you rely on people outside who are doing that as part of their day-to-day work, is to keep up with the changes. So that's a little bit of TBD on where I might start, and where I might grow, and what I would like to have in-house versus rely on some expert partners for. But overall, I do know that I value, and if it wasn't obvious already through this conversation, I do value different perspectives, and that could come from really people from all backgrounds. So I would like to try and create a diverse and inclusive organization as much as possible.
I'm going to be really excited to see what you put together. I think it's going to be absolutely amazing. They're really lucky to have you. Before we close out, I would love to find out what advice you would give to an aspiring higher ed CMO.
Yeah, I feel like right now might feel like, okay, this is not the area you want to be leading. I feel like there's just, there's so many challenges. I know the pandemic has really disrupted everybody and everything. So, I can see the hesitancy in certain people or certain functions, and not wanting to perhaps seek this role out. But I would say that it is also a very exciting time. I haven't seen this industry come together the way it has. We've had, we've organically, thanks to Twitter and perhaps some other media, we've organically created ways to bring people together regardless of the institutional affiliation. I've also, never seen a more mature marketing function in higher education. I know we have ways to go when you compare to corporate, but the fact that we don't have to convince people that you need somebody to do brand management, or that your institution is a brand, or that students are your customers, all those things that we couldn't say and do at one point, that we are mature enough right now, and that the leadership recognizes the potential, the fact that so many CMOs have a seat at the table or at the cabinet level. I feel like now is a really good time to pursue it. So I'll say that, if for people who are even considering, is this the right path for me? But the other thing I would say is get out of your own vertical. I think the broader you get with just understanding the institution, the better chances of you making an impact, not just with marketing, but with really having that broad perspective. I know Terry Flannery talks about that, right? I feel like that marketing leadership are perfectly poised to get a broad view of the institution. They see what's coming in and how people are coming in. They see the current state and the student experience, and they see the alumni and the donor side, and they really can look at the end-to-end journey. So look at that end-to-end journey and try and get involved and understanding that. So, during the pandemic, I guess, unfortunately or fortunately, that situation allowed me to work closer with student affairs, for instance, and do some campaigns there. you know, unfortunately or fortunately, the Black Lives Matter movement was a catalyst for really getting us talking more and more with our diversity and inclusion division. So those types of things should be happening, and we shouldn't be waiting for a catalyst like a crisis to get groups together. So get out of your vertical, get out of your division, and see if you can get involved in committees. Raise your hand at, if somebody's looking for something. I know I definitely raised my hand every time somebody tapped into me to even volunteer with CASE or AMA, or there's a bunch of professional development conferences and committees and commissions that have, I feel like suddenly there's a lot of momentum around that, and being tapped to play a role in that. I jumped at those opportunities because I think that really bode well for my next step, which was to be a CMO.
I think that those opportunities, that's one area where I think we've done the same sort of thing. Like, I say yes. Like, you ask me to do something, yes, I'll do that. Almost to my detriment in 2022, I've overcommitted a lot in 2022, but there's opportunities to talk to other people and get different perspectives and be a part of a community. And I talk about this a lot on this podcast, but this community is so great and so giving and so receptive to sharing viewpoints and ideas with other people. And I just don't know if that happens outside of higher ed as much. So Kin, tell me where people can find you online.
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on both Twitter and LinkedIn. I think those are probably best. So Twitter is at Kin Sejpal, KINSEJPAL. And if on LinkedIn you search for Kin Sejpal, hopefully you'll find me.
Any other closing thoughts before we close out the episode?
I just want to give a shout out to all my mentors along the way. I know this was a conversation about my journey to becoming a CMO, and in the time that you and I decided on this podcast, I have landed a position, and it's been so rewarding, but I couldn't have done it without some of the people. I feel like if I call out a few names, I will miss out on others, but they know who they are, and they've been exceptionally supportive in helping open doors when I thought there were no doors left. And yeah, so just seek out mentors and stay in touch with them. Some of my mentors, I've known them now since 2009, since I graduated, and we've never had a formal working relationship or anything, but I still seek them out, and they still remember me, and that's been immensely helpful.
That's awesome. Well, Kin, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you so much for listening. Don't forget you can join the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag HigherEdCMO. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at JamieHuntIMC. That's JAIMEHUNTIMC for more opportunities to connect. And be well, and let's go bust some silos.
Hey y'all, Zach here from Enrollify. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO with Jaime Hunt. If you like this episode, do us a huge favor and hit that follow and subscribe button below. Furthermore, if you've got just 2 minutes to spare, we would greatly appreciate you leaving a rating and a review of this show on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. But Enrollify is far more than just a podcast network. Enrollify is where higher ed comes to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're a growing learning community of 4,000 members, and we'd love to welcome you into the fold. You can access our free blog articles, newsletters, e-courses, and more, or purchase our master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery at enrollify.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and welcoming you into the community. Again, you can subscribe for free at enrollify.org.